Let's go back to a top story this morning, and that is about the 5 counties that are under partial lockdown. And we cross over live to Nakuru, where we understand that in spite of having valid passes, journalists in Nakuru are some of those affected. Now, last evening, one of us was assaulted by the police actually, and his equipment vandalized for being outdoors during curfew hours. Let's get an update from Ibrahim Karanja. Ibrahim Karanja, good morning and happy Easter. What exactly transpired?
Well, good morning, Brenda. Indeed, this is disturbing news to the media fraternity this morning after the reports last night of a journalist by the name David Omurunga of Milele FM, who was out during curfew hours, actually coming from the office where he was filing a story. And he came across a number of police officers who roughed him up, even physically assaulting him and taking his equipment of work. David Omurunga, a journalist of Milele FM, of course, accredited by the Media Council of Kenya and a gazetted essential service provider. Remember that gazette notice by Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i last week on Tuesday. And that is why I want to speak to the journalists, David Omurunga, as well as Kioko Wakivandi, who's the branch secretary, Kenya Union of Journalists in Nakuru, because this has actually caused an uproar. Thank you so much, Kioko, for speaking to us on KTN News. Yes. Quite an unfortunate happening last evening, one of us being assaulted by police. What do we have to say as the union?
I mean, it's very clear. Like sometimes the lawyers like to say, the law is very clear. Like you have mentioned about that gazette notice, that journalists have been listed as essential service providers by the CS Security. And therefore, what we can only demand is maximum cooperation from security agencies with respect to the way that journalists are going to be performing their duties during this pandemic. Like some quarters have mentioned, we are in a war. And journalists are very important soldiers in this war. They are part of perhaps we would say, the makeup of the Trojan horse with respect to the fight that we have against the pandemic. And therefore, what we can just ask the police and all security agencies is to respect that gazette notice so that then we don't continue seeing the kind of harassment we saw with our colleague last night. In fact, because of that gazette notice, we cannot even say that journalists were caught during curfew hours, because if the gazette notice recognizes our role as frontline workers, then that overrules, that the fact that someone will come and say we were arrested during curfew hours. Yes.
Well, and this brings out the issue of what the police understood from that particular gazette notice. Of course, most of us leave the office way past 8 p.m. For this particular zone. Given that we even have bulletins running at 9 to 11 p.m., where does it leave journalists if the police will be continuing to harass journalists at these particular hours?
I mean, it is just sheer ignorance by the police, because we understand in this particular case, the journalist in question even not only identified himself as a journalist, but even went ahead, to show them his identity card, that is his accreditation card. And apart from that, he even showed them his equipment and so on and so forth. And even after that, they went on, to mock him, some even telling him that you are the journalists who pretend to be learned and so on and so forth. So when you look at it, then you realize that it was really targeted. The security officers in question cannot pretend not to have known, even if ignorance of the law has no defense. But even these ones went ahead and took whatever. I mean, it is just out of that sheer ignorance. We are saying that one of us was greatly harmed last night, and we demand not only for justice, but for action to be taken against those officers. We are aware also that MCK is trying to put on, some measures to safeguard journalists. There are those, we would call them, quote-unquote, safety jackets, that are increasing visibility of journalists during this period. We will request that MCK reaches to us pretty fast, so that then we increase the visibility of journalists in this region and avoid such cases.
Thank you, Kyoko. And Brenda, let me bring the victim, David Omurunga of Milele FM, still dressed how he was dressed last night. Omurunga, perhaps you may want to tell us how it went last night.
Bila shaka mwenzangu, hivi ndivyo hali ilivyokuwa. Nilikuwa natoka kazini ikielekea saa 2:10 hivi, lakini ghafla binvu jamaa wanne wakatokezea, nikadhani kwamba ni majambazi, kwa maana jinsi walivyokuwa wanakuja si kawaida. Ukiangalia mambo yaliyotokea, ukiangalia kama mimi sasa hivi unaangalia, walipasua nguo, wamepasua, na huo ndio mkoba nilikuwa nimeubeba jana na bidhaa zangu za matumizi nyumbani. Goti hapa limeumia. Tunapozungumza saa hizi sina my recorder imepotea. National ID card imepotea. Sasa ndo najiuliza kwamba iweje hii leo ya kwamba sisi kama wanahabari, je, kuwa mwanahabari ni kuwa mhalifu? Inakasirisha sana.
Na Omurunga, punguza hamaki kidogo. Sijui kama umefanya ripoti kutoka kwa maafisa katika kituo cha polisi, ikizingatiwa kwamba ni wale maafisa ambao unafaa kuripoti kwao. Alafu pili, ulipelekwa katika kituo cha polisi ama ulijaribu kutafuta pengine wakuu wa polisi wakasema vipi?
Bila shaka wakati huo nilipoingizwa ndani ya ile Mariamu ama ile Land Cruiser, nikateremshwa nikampigia Madam OCPD Elena Kabukuru akaniambia pigia bwana OCS Derek Nyaga. Nikampigia nikiwa ndani ya Land Cruiser. Nikampigia, lakini ile kujivuta kwake, kujikokota kwake, credit kakatika. Nikaokoa, nikampigia kama niko ndani ya Land Cruiser ninaelekea Central Police Station. Mimi ni mwanahabari wa Milele FM. Hata Madam OCPD yeye huwa haniiti Omurunga, ananiita Milele. So kufika pale nikampigia, lakini hakuna chochote kilifanyika. Ile Land Cruiser kaingizwa pale, tukaanza unaambiwa toka ukiingia. Nikaingia ndani ya Central, lakini wakati ule nikiingia ndani hivi wakasema ni nani huyo mtu wa media? Ndio baadaye Derek Nyaga ambaye ni OCS, nikamuuliza sasa mimi naelekea nyumbani, nitaenda vipi? Because I have no means. Akaniambia ngojea kwanza tumalize round up kuzunguka kwote, ndio tukuje tufikiri tuone kama tutakufanya nini, tutakupeleka nyumbani. Lakini Mungu ni mkubwa, aledi akanisaidia, nikapata mtu wa patrol wa security patrol ndo akanipeleka nyumbani.
Of course, thank you so much Omurunga, na pole kwa hayo. Bila shaka najua ni jambo ambalo Kenya Union of Journalists ilikuwa ikifuatilia. But Brenda, earlier before going on air, I also spoke to Media Council of Kenya CEO David Omoyo, who said that he'll be issuing a statement from here in Nakuru at exactly 10 a.m. That's where he is. And we shall see what he says. But it is quite unfortunate, given that at a time when journalists will be talking about, when journalists have been consistently reporting about, say, matatus in Nakuru carrying excess passengers, owing to the COVID-19 protocols, at a time when journalists have been reporting about people freely moving in and out of the one-zoned area out of Nakuru County, the police, instead of handling this, are moving to harass journalists. I'm also told that the CEO of Media Council of Kenya, David Omoyo, is on phone, Brenda. That is what we have from this particular side.
Right, Ibrahim Karanja, I know we still have you in this conversation with David Omoyo, the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya. So Ibrahim, do stay with us. And let me just begin with Mr. Omoyo. I mean, this is not the first time that we're talking about journalists being harassed. Yes, yet we've been put under that category of the essential services. A few months ago,